My name's Danny Bullock. I'm a life-centered planner with Dream Builders Financial Services here in Rhode Island. And so I have been, again, Danny Bullock, life-centered planner. I have been in insurance and finance for 13 years. I have worked for a couple of the major investment firms before working with an independent advisor the last 4 years. And the beginning of the year, decided to go out on my own, which technically the only thing changed is I now get more of the pie, to be perfectly honest with you. And I don't, I get to deal and talk to the people, I like you guys there. But I wanted to do more educational webinars, seminars, and just putting information out there that I thought was good for everybody to kind of know and have in their toolbox. And with me, my co-host tonight, Rebecca Dubrey, and I'll let her give a little bit more about her background, but she is a will and estate attorney. And we have had the pleasure, we actually did a webinar about 7 weeks ago, my family love letter, and it talked about the importance of will and estate planning. And I thought it'd be important to bring her in on this subject that we're going to talk about, because even though we're going to talk about building wealth and talking about life insurance and things of that nature, I think it's always good to introduce will and trust into every conversation when we talk about money when we can. So Rebecca, would you mind introducing yourself and giving a little bit more information about who you are?
Sure. Thanks, Danny, for including me again. And thanks everybody for joining us. So I'm a trust and estates attorney at Orson & Bersini. I've been practicing law for about 14 years, and I work primarily with individuals, families, and business owners to help them plan for some eventualities that will happen. So that includes some income transfers during their lifetime, charitable planning, and then obviously estate planning. So I work with folks like Danny and other, financial planners and CPAs in order to craft up the best plan, because I think that the team approach is always better, because I know what I know and Danny knows what he knows. And then usually a CPA gets involved and they can, kind of round out, I think, the team. And I think Danny would agree with that as
Absolutely.
his approach as well. So I think that this is a good topic to include trust around, because there is a trust component that can help with what you're going to talk about.
All right. So tonight's webinar is going to be on a concept we like to call becoming your own bank. And I think this is important because I believe it's one of the best kept secrets when it comes to overall financial planning. And it can be, like I said, a great tool if it's set up properly, in addition to all the other things that you have going on. And so, quick disclosure, this information is intended for education purposes only. Doesn't represent any tax, financial, or insurance advice. I am telling you that if you have any questions, by all means, at the end, I'll put up my information and Rebecca's contact information. You can contact us for a consult, but this in no way is considered a consultation. So now that we got that out of the way, my goal tonight is to show you a system to grow and protect your money that has predictabilities and guarantees, and it helps you create wealth along the way. But the most important piece of this is you get to know your financial future a little better and have a better financial peace of mind. I can't talk about or describe enough how many clients and individuals I've met with who have so much uncertainty around finances and not having the peace of mind when it comes to what are they going to do, especially now in this season with the pandemic and everything going on. But I'm going to try to give you some more information to help you have some little more peace of mind. So real quick pop quiz. If you could only choose one option, which would you rather have? A safe way to save money without fear of losing your principal, a guaranteed minimum return on investments, a way to build retirement income tax-free, a secure financial inheritance for your loved ones, or all of the above? Now, take a second and look at that and read through it. I'm pretty sure when you started to read through it, one or the other probably jumped right out at you. And then after you read all of them, you probably said to yourself, I'd like to have all of them, if I could, if it were a possibility. For the most part, there are little to no products that I know of that give you the ability to have all four of these in one option. And this is what we're going to talk about tonight. It's called the Infinite Banking Concept, or the IBF. It has a couple of different names as well. We actually, used to call it the rich man's Roth. And you might even hear it called a LIRP, Life Insurance Retirement Plan. All of those are different names for the concept, but it was created back in the 80s by Nelson Nash, and it's a uniquely designed, properly structured whole life cash value product. It works with participating dividend-paying mutual life insurance companies. And I highlighted participating dividend-paying mutual life insurance companies. And the reason that's important is because there are a couple of different type of insurance companies. One being one that is for stockholders, and the other being one for the policyholders. And usually, majority of them pay dividends to the stockholders. And if there are any money or anything like that left, they may give some to the policyholders. You want to operate with a participating life insurance company. And doing that allows you to be able to receive a dividend, and they don't give a dividend to the shareholders. You also want to make sure they pay dividends in the last 100 years, and most importantly, it should have mutual somewhere in the insurance company's name. And so those are important. And we'll talk a little bit more towards the end in detail about those. But those are the important factors when it comes to looking at whole life insurance and setting up infinite banking concept, or IBF. All right. So there are literally a million ways to invest money and grow money. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about those tonight, but primarily they fall in three buckets. And I'm going to go through the three buckets very quickly just to give you an idea of what they are and how they work. And so first bucket would be the taxable bucket. And in the taxable bucket, you have your savings account, CDs, money market account, stocks, bonds, mutual funds. And how do you know it's a taxable account? Usually at the end of the year, you get this nice little friendly letter from the IRS, and it says, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, your investments grew by this much. You now owe this much. It's called a 1099. And so if you get a 1099 at the end of the year, more than likely that is a taxable account. Now, what are some of the benefits to a taxable account? Outside of being 100% taxable, they're very liquid. Now, this is important when it comes to having an emergency fund. Things happen in life. You get laid off, car needs new tires, need a new roof. You want to have an emergency fund. And usually prior to 2020, the rule of thumb, and the only thing that advisors and people in the finance industry could agree on, is that you would usually want to have about 6 months of living expenses shared or saved up, I think that's going to change going forward. We are now 7.5 months into this pandemic. And if you saved up 6 months of living expenses, you probably would have exhausted those, or be right at the end to exhaust those savings now. So I got to believe going forward, we're probably going to start talking about anywhere from 9 months to honestly a year of living expenses. But that's your taxable bucket. Next bucket is your tax deferred bucket. And we know that very well. If you ever had a job, you had a 401k, IRA, 403b if you work for the government or the school system. Annuities allow you to put money away tax deferred. And the benefits of a tax deferred bucket is the tax deduction. If you made $100,000 last year and you put $10,000 away in your 401k, your taxable income is now $90,000. And so that's one of the benefits to tax deferred bucket. And the other side of that is when you actually do start taking out the money that has been tax deferred, they now call it ordinary income. And I could do a whole nother webinar on tax deferred or 401k type products and some of the things you should be aware of before you allow that to be your only source of retirement income. But for the sake of this conversation, and that's a conversation for another day, we'll just leave it at those two. And so the third bucket, and I think this is my favorite bucket, some people call it tax advantaged. I like tax free. I like the way that rolls off my tongue, tax free. The word free at the end really resonates well with me. And usually when we talk about tax free, and there are a lot of products I've heard, a lot of people talk about tax deferred products. And usually when they talk about tax deferred, tax free products, they usually like to talk about three products in general. And we'll go through them real quick. And they're usually muni bonds, Roth IRAs, which I love, and whole life insurance. And so in order for them to be completely considered tax-free, it has to pass the tax-free test. And what is that? It has to be able to have no federal tax, no state tax, and no capital gains tax applied to the investment. Now, looking at that, does municipal bonds qualify? No, not really. Roth IRA still does, and so does whole life insurance. And neither of those cause any issues with your Social Security when you start taking the money out as ordinary income. So for the sake of just this presentation, those are the three buckets of investing when we look at just across the board, a broad stroke of the three buckets of money that we're going to talk about tonight. So let's talk about the benefits of the Roth IRA. After 59 and a half, all distributions are 100% tax-free. Like I said, they don't call Social Security taxation. Your contribution before 50, they just raised it this year, another $500, is $6,000. And if you're over 50, you can put up to $7,000 a year. Now let's look at the whole life benefits of the whole life policy. And if I go too fast, by all means, let me know to slow down because I can get rolling, especially when I start talking about something I like. So the benefits of a whole life plan are tax-free growth, does not create a 1099 at all. There are no penalties if you pull out money before 59 and a half. And if you notice with the Roth, it said any income pulled out after 59 and a half is tax-free. It doesn't affect your Social Security tax. Tax-free distributions in forms of loans, and we'll talk about that in a couple of the case studies in a second. And good thing about the tax-free distributions in the form of loans is there's no credit check, there's no applications, and there's no question to what you're taking the money out for. If you were to try to get a loan through a typical bank or anything like that, they would want to have all of those questions. It'd definitely be a credit check, and they wouldn't want to know what you are pulling the money out for. This is most important too. No income or contribution limit. Unlike the Roth IRA, if you make over a certain dollar amount, if you're single or married filing jointly, they have contribution limits. You can't make over a certain amount, and if you do, you can't contribute to the Roth IRA. And then, like I said, you're only able to put $6,000 if you're under 50 and $7,000 a year if you're over 50. There's no legislation risk. There is no law that permits you for putting a certain amount of money into these policies. Flexible contributions. You can put as little as or as much as the policy is designed to have you put into the policy. If you're having a great year, you can up your contribution. If you're not having a great year, you can put a little less. Most importantly, at the end of the day, you have a tax-free death benefit that you can give to your dependents or, move into a trust for legacy planning. So I'll let you take a look at that. So let's look at a case study. Now, started looking at some case studies, and instead of just taking random numbers and people, what I did is I actually took some clients of mine, and these aren't their real names, and it's not the real numbers, but the situation is real. And then I took, some of their information just to make it round it out and not make it for the sake of just having an illustration. These are actual people. The dollar amounts are different though. And so Rudy and Tiffany, Rudy's a 32-year-old business owner. He owns his own company. Tiffany, beautiful wife, 28-year-old stay-at-home mother. She has the harder of the two jobs. They have a 2-year-old daughter, Naomi. They have twins on the way. They're home owners. They make, after taxes, Rudy brings in about $200,000. His concerns are he wants to save for his children's college, but also add to his retirement. He has a SEP IRA. And so what we looked at is taking $5,000 a year for 20 years for this concept for his policy. Now, with Rudy, there were a couple of things that we wanted to highlight, and that is he's the breadwinner. So if he dies, we wanted to make sure that the money that he put in, even if it were for the first couple of years, if he died, he would get, some kind of death benefit. His family would receive some kind of death benefit. But also we wanted to set something up where he had flexibility, and that's on both ends. If the business is good and everything is going good, he could put more into the policy. And if it's not, he's having a slow year, there is policy minimums as well. So initial annual premium is $5,000 a year. Initial death benefit face amount is $194,000. Just call it shy at $195,000. Total premium paid for 20 years. And the only reason we wanted to do this 20 years, we could have him pay it until he's 60, 65, but we wanted to look at other options when he got later on into the meat part of his life, hitting his 50s. And if he wanted to continue paying, he could. And if not, he could take that money and do some other things with. So I want to point out a couple of things here with this policy. First, you have two columns, in the guaranteed column and the non-guaranteed column. The guaranteed column represents if the insurance company does not pay a dividend at all. So this is just him putting $5,000 into the policy every year, and he does not receive a dividend at all. It's just the money compounding every year. The non-guaranteed assumptions are what the policy is actually doing now. Now, the reason we wanted to have it with a whole life policies have a guaranteed minimum. The major four, their guaranteed minimum is 4%. So worst comes to worst, the policy is going to at least, dividend is going to be at least 4%. Right now in the pandemic, four major companies, the least it's returning right now is 5.2, and the most is just over 6%. And that's in a pandemic while all of this stuff is going on. There is no cap to the dividend that the company pays, and it's not tied to the investment market. So this is in some ways a turbo-sized savings account. And that's the way I like to look at it, instead of addressing it as some type of investment account, because of the guaranteed minimum that he gets from the dividend. That allows us to be able to bank on these numbers. So these numbers will never change. They can only go up. Let's look at year 15. Naomi is getting ready to go to college. Guaranteed numbers. He has just under $75,000 of cash in this policy. In the event that he wanted to take some money out and he wanted to, pay towards his daughter's tuition, he could do that. And he would take it out by way of loan. And we mentioned that earlier, and I don't want to get too entrenched in the loans and things of that nature, because it's so many variations in how they work. Everybody's situation is different. And so it's always better if you have questions about it, like I said, reach out to me and we can run the policies for you individually and go through it then. But a couple of good things about the loan in itself is it doesn't count against his cash value. The insurance company just takes a lien out on the cash value in the policy. Now, what does that mean? So he borrows $25,000. They do not remove $25,000 from the cash account. It remains $74,000. So the interest, the dividend that's paid is still paid on the $75,000, not the $50,000 that it would really be if he took the $25,000 out. Why is that a benefit? Because even though he's taking out a loan and he would have a loan interest rate to pay it back, he's still receiving a dividend payment on a higher number. And so he's always going to be making more money on his cash value, even if he takes a loan out of the policy. And again, these numbers are guaranteed. if you look at the number here, and I ran these numbers at the 5.2 interest rate, he would have 89,000 based on today's dividend return right now. And so what if he decided to expand his business? What if he wanted to buy a truck? You know, he knows that he can borrow the money from his cash account and he wouldn't need to go to a bank. He wouldn't need to fill out an application, and he wouldn't need to give them a bunch of information. He could fill out the loan application and literally have a check for the dollar amount from his cash account in 5 to 7 business days. It's that quick. And so why would I also set up for him to want to have some cash that he takes out of this policy for his daughter's education as opposed to a 529 plan? Now, I love 529 plans, but there are some restrictions to it. And one of the bigger ones, and a lot of people don't know this until they actually go to use it, is it counts as ordinary income. So when you're filling out the FAFSA form for your child, they actually declare that money as income, and it hurts their grants and scholarships. And so the money that they probably would get for grants, it would be lessened because now you're showing more income because you have a 529 plan. What we would do if he wanted to do a 529 plan as well, we would have him put it in a relative's name, put it in a grandparent's name, put it in an aunt or uncle's name. They can still fund it, but it doesn't count against the child because they only look at the parent's income. Another downside to 529 plans, it can only be used specifically for college expenses. And we're not talking about food. We're not talking about a car. We're not talking about clothes. We're talking about tuition. We're talking about books. We're talking about room and board. So if he wanted to give his daughter a car to help her get around in college, he couldn't use the 529 plan to do that. And so that's why we set this up as well. Let's say that he doesn't end up taking any income out for college for his children. He does the smart thing and sends them to community college for a couple of years, and they get scholarships and grants to finish their last 2 years at a state college. That's, you know, what we would do. Let's look at what it is when he's 65. And this, again, is guaranteed money based on no dividend being given at all. He's $167,000. Him and his wife want to take a vacation. They want to pull out $50,000 to give to one of their daughters because they just got married and they want to give them some seed money to buy a house or something like that. He can pull that money out via loan and give it to them. And again, not counting against them in any fashion. How they take the loan back, if you do not pay it back during the life of the policy owner, they take it out of the death benefit. So he takes $50,000 out of the policy and he doesn't pay it back, and he dies at 65. He has $459,000 of death benefit in this policy. They would take the 25 or 50 grand from there and remit the $400,000 to his descendants or his heirs. And the reason I brought Rebecca in is usually with conversations like this, we never want to set families up for failure. What would be a recommendation, Rebecca, when it comes to will and estate planning for somebody like Rudy? What would you recommend for him once we have this policy set up, and why?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. One I want to say from sort of a baseline of information is that everybody should be checking their beneficiary designations all the time, making sure that they're up to date and they have them set up correctly. I would, in this couple's case, probably set up either a will with a testamentary trust in it or a separate trust, depending on whatever the other assets are, to make sure that if something were to happen to Rudy and his wife, who I can't remember her name, Tiffany, that there would be somebody available to take these assets and make sure that they go to the children to pay for education, health, things like that. So that would probably be my kind of baseline recommendation for them. There could be some other, there's other tax planning options because they're married that we would also want to be sure we were taking advantage of. So some states still have estate taxes. And so when Danny says that the money passes tax-free, he means income tax-free, not necessarily estate tax-free.
Thank
so
you.
if you live in a, nope, that's okay. So if you live in a state like Rhode Island or Massachusetts where there's still an estate tax, then you would also want to be mindful of how much, cash value and death benefit you're sort of building up inside of a policy like this to make sure you're taking advantage of that planning as well.
All right. So that's what we did for Rudy. Now let's move on. And these are actual clients of mine. Like I said, the dollar amounts and things of that nature have just changed. This is Trisha C. Now, Trisha's a 45-year-old single woman with no children. She's living her best life. Annual income is just, 150,000 plus. She has $60,000 in her savings account, which we have long discussions about why. And she's a homeowner. She owns investment property. Her concerns, she's contributing to her 401k up to the match, wants to save additional income, but unfortunately, she does not qualify for a Roth because of her income limits. So what we did with Trisha is she takes about $7,500 a year, and we're going to go the next 15 years only. And then again, it doesn't mean that policy we have to stop paying it 15 years. If she wants to continue, she can. But we set this policy design up for her life as it is right now. Now, she gets married. She does decide to have a child, adopt children, whatever. We would go back in and then we would look to rework the policy to suit her new lifestyle. So annual premium paid $7,500. Initial face amount of death benefit just over $320,000, and total premiums paid for the 15 years is just over $112,000. Now, again, looking at her policy, I like to look at year 20. Usually individuals like Trisha end up loving their job and they end up loving the work. And even if it's they don't have an employer, they're probably self-employed, and they end up working well past 60, 65. But again, looking at the guaranteed number for Trisha at age 65, it's $135,000. Now, what could she do for them with that money? Maybe she has a niece or nephew she wants to help support who goes to college. Maybe she has a couple of charities or nonprofits she likes to participate or support, and she wants to give them some money. Maybe she just wants to take some money and travel Europe for a month. Whatever she wants to do, that money's guaranteed. But I also like the fact that there's a death benefit, and I'm going to have Rebecca talk to that in a second. But let's look at age 75, and let's say Trisha's getting up in age and she's now starting to think about things like long-term care. Well, I don't have any children. I'm not married. Who's going to take care of me in the event that I actually need nursing home care? She could actually pull this money out to help pay for nursing home care, whether it's at home or in an actual nursing home. And again, the same rules apply. They're not going to count it against her as any 1099 or ordinary income. And she can actually not pay the balance back and let it be taken out of her death benefit. Rebecca, for somebody like Trisha, what would be a recommendation you would make with her? Now, my first question would be, why does a single person need a will or a trust or anything like that at all? Do they need one?
Yeah, so yes, most likely. The rule is basically if you have stuff and family, you probably need an estate plan. So maybe if you're 18 or, early 20s and you don't really have anything that is of value, it might not be valuable. But if you have a house or a 401k or children, or, a lot of times too, it's if you have family you don't like, you want to make sure
they don't get your money.
Frankly,
terrible.
They don't get your money, but then they also aren't the guardians of your children and things like that. So basically, for most of the people that come to me, my recommendation is at a minimum, they should have a will and healthcare and financial powers of attorney. So a lot of times, what prevents people from doing that is they get really tied up in who's going to do the jobs that are required. So who's going to be their executor, who's going to be their healthcare agent, things like that. So my kind of recommendation is don't let, the perfect be the enemy of the good in that situation. If you want it to be your parents, just pick your parents. So pick somebody and, don't leave it to chance. And so, especially if you have young children, you want to make sure you have a guardianship provision in your will and probably a testamentary trust, which is a trust that's not created until you pass away, but can be created for young children if that were to happen specifically. But specifically in this case, obviously she doesn't have children, but like you said, she may have younger nieces and nephews. The same thing would apply because children can't technically inherit money without going through a custodial process. So she would potentially want to have at least the will with the testamentary trust provisions. She may also want to set up her own trust account because some people like that because you can avoid probate and also create privacy around your assets so that not everybody on planet Earth gets to know what you have. So, there's a lot of reasons besides asset level why people make decisions. But in this particular case, I would probably recommend a will and a freestanding, what we call a revocable trust, meaning a trust that you can change and move money in and out of with ease. And because she does have such a high income earning potential, she probably would prefer the privacy and the control over the assets after she passes away.
It's good advice. And you mentioned something about things going to probate if she didn't have this set up. Who actually pays for the court to decide what happens with your money?
Mm-hmm. So if you have no will, then the state makes the decisions. There's usually every state pretty much has an intestate provision that would govern how your assets pass, whether you like the people or not, they get this stuff. And then, your state has to pay for it. So either way, so if you have no will and the state decides and your state pays for it, if you have a will, then the state doesn't decide, but your state still pays for it. But it does, yeah, I mean, trust administration isn't free either. So, it's not necessarily that one is always better than the other. It's again becomes a function of sitting down and figuring out what the costs are today versus what the costs will be in the future and where you fall in that scale and how much, you want to spend now versus how much you want to spend later.
And you want to make sure that the money you have, at the very least, you're spending it the way you want to spend it and the government isn't. So I think that's very important. So I have a good pocket of clients like Trisha. There are a lot of professional, successful women who don't have children and they have a lot of assets. This is one of the things that I set up to help them in the event they get on in years and they run into what we would call a possible tax bomb, where they've saved so much money in their 401k, they're still working, and they possibly have to start taking Social Security, and they're going to get all of this income taxed, and they didn't think about it, pre-plan it before. Some of this money could actually help to go to pay some of those taxes. And so we look at different ways to strategize with the overall financial picture. So we're not just looking at one thing individually. And so again, this would be a complement to the things that she already has. And it would work along with those things as well. So last, and this is the best one, only because it's Jack and Diane. Great thing about doing your own webinars and putting the information together, I can name these people anything I want. So here's a little ditty about Jack and Diane. All right. Jack, 62 years old, Diana, 60 years old. Combined annual income, $250,000. They own a home. They have a vacation home. They have just over $1 million in their retirement accounts. They have $425,000 in CDs and savings, and a couple of their concerns. And these are real life concerns for the baby boomers now. They're going to work well past 70. There are some who absolutely love their job, and it's become, more of their identity, and they can't see doing anything else. And so they're literally going to work past 70, and they want to also leave an inheritance to their grandchildren. Now, we had to look at this as a couple, and we had to decide who would be the best person to set up the IBC for. Would it be better for Jack or better for Diane? And I want to show you the difference between both. First, we looked at it for Jack. And again, just looking at the guaranteed numbers, 62, single premium, they would take 250,000 out of their savings and put into the IBC. Initial death benefit face amount for him is just under $530,000. Now look at year 5. If he died, what would be the actual death benefit? Just again, guaranteed, so it's just under $530,000. If they needed cash or anything like that in year 5, he could pull it out. Same rules apply for this account. This is just a single premium dump in. So his death benefit face amount is $530,000. Now let's look at Diane. Age 60, she's a little younger, same amount of money dumping in, but the initial death benefit face amount is $622,000. Women, usually are a lot healthier. The mortality rates are a little better for women. They live longer. So women, unless they have some major health issue, are 9 times out of 10 probably going to get a better rate than men, just because the lifeline speaks to them a lot better than it does to men. And so we would look to take this policy out on Diane. Year 3, Diane dies. We move $622,000 into her estate. And that's, with the deposit of $250,000. I think what's also important is look at the net cash value the first year. If she wanted to take $40,000 out of it, it's still liquid. She could still take the money out of it. It's not like it's going to be tied up for 20 years or she can't touch it now that she has it in there. It's just as liquid. She can pull it out, have the money in 5 to 7 days. Let's look at when she's 85 years old. These are, again, I keep saying guaranteed because I want you guys to understand that this is even if they don't return a dividend. Guaranteed she lives to 85. There's $475,000 of cash value in this policy. What if she had 4 grandchildren and she wanted to give them each $25,000 when they got married? She could take $100,000 out and they would take that from the death benefit when she died, and that money would then pass on to her grandchildren by way, and I would push her to get a trust, which Rebecca's going to talk about in a second. But I think this is important, again, to look at how the policy is structured and understanding a couple of things. Based on the dollar amount, of course, it'll perform better. The more money you put in, the more money that's allowed to benefit from the death benefit. And so that's very, very important. But Rebecca, what would you talk to Diane and Jack about when it comes to setting up legacy planning with the death benefit for her grandchildren?
I would definitely recommend a trust for them. There's a lot of things that I would probably recommend for them. There's a possibility, depending, I'd have to look into it a little bit more, the specifics around the specific policy that's written, of putting it into something called the Irrevocable Life Insurance Trust, which would give you the benefit of both the control over the asset, but then removing the asset from their estate, so they wouldn't pay estate tax on it if it's properly structured. There's a lot of bells and whistles with that you have to go through. So you have to make sure you have everything done correctly. But that's definitely a possibility because if they live in Rhode Island or Massachusetts, they're definitely in an estate taxable quote unquote problem. So we want to make sure we are addressing that. So at a minimum, I'd put them into what we call an AB trust, where they would split up their assets. So even in your situation, your example, I could even see them splitting the 250 and doing one policy for him and one for her, because then you can split up the assets, you can split up the beneficiary designation, make the trust the beneficiary, put it in there, and then like you said, if it's going to go to grandchildren, you can then take that money and give it to the grandchildren inside of the trust. And it's, it meets all the requirements that you're saying, but you would potentially pay estate tax unless you properly structure the split. So each would have their own sort of bucket, and that way you could take advantage of the maximum amount of estate tax exemption in each state.
And you can also control how they receive it once you put it in the trust, right? You can designate what a criteria in which the grandchildren could or would have to meet in order to receive the money.
Basically you could do almost anything, barring a few things that would be considered not legal, but anything that's legal you could pretty much do, and you could hold it for long periods of time, make it college specific, or business, college, start a business. You could be a specific,
get married, have kids, anything like that. Yeah. So,
no, you can't do that.
Oh, you can't? No.
You can't force somebody to get married and have children before you give them money.
Can't pick them either. No, God.
Nope. Sorry.
So that can't work for my kids. So all right, I got to take that out. But no. So again, this is just a overview of 3 different scenarios. A couple of things to remember when you're looking into infinite banking concept and using whole life insurance. One, it has to be done with whole life insurance. I've seen policies where people talked about the concept and it was done with the IUL or the VUL. Just doesn't work because it doesn't have the guarantee. And it isn't based on company's dividend. 9 times out of 10, it probably is based on an index. If it's an IUL or if it's a VUL, it's definitely based on a mutual fund or one of the indexes. You want to make sure it's with a stable and mutual life insurance company. Always, again, making sure that they've been around for 150 years. They can show you the record. It's not a lot of pages. It's a 1-sheet page. They can show you the dividends that this company has returned for the last 100 years. And if you're thinking about that, you really need to ask them so you see what they've done over the last 100 years. Lots happened in the last 100 years. And you can get an idea of what the dividend will be, on a year-to-year basis. And so, again, it has the minimum guarantee, but you want to make sure that it's with a stable and it has the word mutual in the life insurance name. Last but definitely not least is the policy design. When we design these policies, we want to solve for the minimum amount of death benefit. These policies are not set up, even though they have a death benefit, they are not a death benefit play. And I've seen them set up where people have, $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 of death benefit and life insurance in year 1. And what that does is create more of a charge for insurance. You're paying for that death benefit. The purpose of these policies are not death benefit. It's about the paid up additions. We want 60 to 75% of the money going into these policies to go working towards the cash value. And that's very important. If you have one of these policies and they have high death benefit, 9 times out of 10, that's how insurance guys get paid. And I can say that because I've been selling insurance, 13 plus years. The bigger the commission comes with the higher death benefit. And so you don't want to have this policy as a death benefit play because we only solve for the minimum because we want the cash value to work the best it can for you. Ways to use the IBC: loans for businesses, real estate, cars, vacation, etc. You can pension maximization. I've actually used these where we have taken individuals who have worked 20 years, corrections, have a couple of correction officers and they're done. They can't touch the pension anyway. The way they're structured, they're not guaranteed. If you were to pull it out, we would pull the money out, move it into one of these policies, and we'd maximize it that way. We've also, we have people who use it to pay off high interest credit debt. Businesses can use it to purchase equipment, financing. Use it, of course, mainly, another good reason is for tax-free retirement income. And so these are all ways you can use the infinite banking concept. And so remember, four things you're going to get with the infinite banking concept is guaranteed minimum return. You're going to get liquid money day one. It's protected. You're not going to lose your principal, and it's tax-free. So I know we went through this kind of fast. We have 9 minutes left. We can get you some questions if we have any. If you have any questions, you want an insurance consult or anything like that, you want to have a custom policy designed for you, we can do that. Contact us at hello@dreambuilder-ri.com. Keep in mind, doesn't really matter state specific. Outside of New York, they have some funky little rules. If you live in the Bronx or in one of the boroughs, they give you a real hard time about writing certain companies in New York. So outside of that, if you want to reach out to me, you can. Rebecca also, she'll offer, if you have will and estate questions, will offer a free half-hour consult. And so I will leave that information up for a second, but we're also going to send out our contact information in the follow-up emails when we're done. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Do we have any questions?
I have a question.
Oh, you have a question. Good. Because I don't think we have any.
Do you have it now? Your examples had $5,000, $7,500 bigger premiums maybe than some people would be looking at. Can you really customize this for? I mean, obviously you can't make it like $1, but like, what would you say would be like the minimum amount of premium that you would want to be thinking about?
Well, again, it goes back to, and that's a good question. It goes back to what's the purpose of the policy in itself. It is to create cash value. And what I mean by that is we can design this anyway, but it's based on the person, age, of course, insurability. If you're in good health, then you get a better rating. And then time, how much time are we looking to pay into the policy? And there's usually a minimum to keep the policy going. And then there's a maximum. And we always want to be aware of both of those, because in times when, you have a down year or something like that, and you don't want to pay, I have one client, female client, she pays $20,000 a year. But this year she decided she wanted to use the money to do something else. To keep her policy going, it was only $1,200. So she was able to pay that. It's going to keep the policy going. But the maximum on the policy is important as well, because the reason we can put money into these policies tax-free is the government has given the allowance. And of course, they're not going to let you get away with it where you could just dump endless amounts of money into it. We have to set the contract up, and the dollar amount, that's the maximum. We can't go over that dollar amount by 1 penny. And if we do, it then becomes a MEC, a modified endowment contract. And then the whole bucket of cash can be taxed. So we would structure it and we would say, okay, based on what you're looking to do, based on the money that you have to put away, we would look to then carve out the policy, the minimum and the maximum, based on who that person is individually, and then what their goals are going forward, and again, based on everything else that they have going on as well. Who is that? Is the impact? All right, Janice says, is the premium paid once a year or broken into installments? You can do it annually, semi-annually, quarterly, or monthly. It's a regular insurance policy. Doesn't matter how you pay the premiums. They can be broken up. We just showed it for illustration purposes. It's a lot easier to show annually. So you can pay it any way you want, annually, semi-annually, monthly, or quarterly. Thank you. Naomi says, 2 questions, please. Is the minimum due in one payment, or can you pay? So we answered that. You can pay it monthly. You can break it up monthly. Do you recommend whole life over term insurance policies? Now, again, term insurance does have a place when you're looking at setting up retirement income or income to be able to create cash value. You can't do that with term life insurance. Usually, a lot of people talk about, you hear the old adage, buy term and invest the difference. I don't like that so much. I believe term has its place. I have clients when they buy property and stuff like that. If they have a, $400,000 note on the house and it's a 15-year note, I say, look, get a 15-year term policy, $300,000. So in the event that something happens to you, your wife or husband will be able to take that money and then pay off the house. But for this specific situation, we wouldn't use term insurance at all. It just wouldn't work. You can't build cash value up in term insurance. So,
and only about 3% of term policies ever actually pay out.
Yeah, and do you know why? Because, and that's where insurance companies make their money. They don't tell you that. Not 9 times out of 10, but 7 or 8 times out of 10, they stop paying it because they no longer see the benefit in having it, or they convert it into a whole life policy.
Yeah,
so you're right.
The policy has to be converted at some point, because when you get to be a certain age, they stop it, which they don't necessarily. I don't know how much people know about that, but that happens to people all the time. They've paid this term policy, and then at 80, they're still alive, and the policy goes away, and it probably made sense when they had little kids in the house and they needed income replacement, but it does make sense to look at your policies. And I'm not trying to swim in your lane, Danny, but
no, absolutely.
I always tell my clients, you need to have somebody look at your policies periodically, the same way that you would have somebody look over your estate plan. You should be having your estate plan reviewed, your policies reviewed every 5 years, or if you have some sort of life event, usually, or, I think life insurance, all your financials, they should be looking at that at least every 5 years and making sure it's all still valid and up to date.
Well, one of the things that we do, I consult, I'll give them a free consultation, look at their policies. And if your situation changes, you need to revisit your life insurance policies. And I don't believe unless you have a 30-year note on a house, I don't know why you would need to take a 30-year term insurance policy, unless it's for a specific reason. And that's why it has a term. Term runs its limit. That term ends, you no longer have a policy. Mm-hmm. And so it's almost like car insurance. If you don't need it, nothing happens, you just end up paying for it. But if you do need it, you're glad that it's there. And so you want to make sure that you have the right policy for your situation. And I think NAVB says, will the amount be paid out only if the policyholder dies? The death benefit will be paid out when the policyholder dies. Or if the policyholder is alive at the completion of the term, the money will be paid out. There is no term on whole life policies. As long as you pay, and we set it up in those structures, the 20-year, 15-year, and then the one-time dump-in, it doesn't have term limits. And so the cash value is there, and you can pull out the cash value at any time. The death benefit is only released upon death. That's why it's called a death benefit. But yeah, to answer your question, Nav, when the policyholder die, whatever is left of the death benefit, if they take out money as a loan from the policy, they'll remit the remaining to their beneficiaries via death benefit. But they are able to pull out the cash out of that policy. You could be 5 years in, and I have some high-end business clients who pulled it out to buy equipment. We were 5 years in, and they pulled it out to do it. Is there a medical exam check to qualify? It is life insurance, and that is one of the requirements. You still have to, very good question, Naomi. You still have to qualify for life insurance. But I want to tell you guys now, a lot of the companies, if you are relatively in good health, right now, because of everything that's going on, and they want to limit the visits. If you don't have any major health issues and you're not on a lot of medication and you've seen your doctor fairly regularly, we have been able to get people through with just doctor's notes, filling out a simple application, signing a HIPAA form for the insurance company to get your doctor's notes, and then they make a decision based on if they'll issue the policy to you within a week. It's been that quick in this season. I've never seen anything like it. And they're lifting a lot of the medical exam restrictions if they don't feel you need it. Let me see. Is there another question?
Oh no, she just said
awesome. Oh, said awesome. Okay. So we got a lot of information out in an hour, and we're right there at the time. I want to thank you guys for checking in with us and hanging out with us. Like I said, I am sending out a survey. You should get it tomorrow morning. If you could please fill it out, answer the questions, just help us out a little better as we go forward and as we put out more content that we think is good for educational purpose. You'd be helping us out a lot. We'd appreciate it. We'll also get the video up and out to you if you want to share it or revisit it again. Again, you'll have our contact information. Me and Rebecca both are available for consults. So if there is nothing else, you guys have a great night. Hey, still enough time to get ready for the debate. That's going to be entertaining in itself. I can't wait. So I will let you guys go. Have a wonderful night until we meet again. All right. Good night.
Thank you,
Rebecca.